So let's talk about loops. Today I'm going to talk about three loops: the for loop, the while loop, and then the do while loop. And then so we are going to start with the for loop, and so for loops just repeats a block of code for any specified amount of time, any specified number of times you wish. And then when it's repeating the code, every time it repeats it once, it's called an iteration. So the for loop iterates over a block of code. And then this is the declaration over here, the declaration of your for loop. First of all, the first expression, it takes three expressions within the brackets. The first one is to initialize your, let me call it your iteration counter. It just keeps track of your iteration. And then the next will be the condition, the condition for the loop, where if that condition evaluates you true, your loop keeps running, your for loop keeps running. But then if it's false, then your loop stops and then it moves on to the next line in your code, outside your for loop, I mean. And then the last one is an optional increment or decrement, a statement that either increases or decreases your like iteration counter. So over here you have a simple for loop definition over here, where we initialize our iteration tracker, which is I, and then we assign it to 0, and then there's our condition over here, I less than 5. So every time the loop comes back to the top and then checks this condition, then I is less than 5, this is true, and then the loop keeps running. It increases I by 1 and then it keeps running. So okay, so I think there's, okay, but let me use this too. Okay, so it just goes that way and then goes back to the top and then increases it until it comes back to the top, checks, and then I is not less than 5 anymore, and then it breaks out to the loop and then it runs whatever code that comes next. Yes, so you can also make your loop infinite by ignoring your increment or decrement expression, or you can just set this condition over here to true. You can just make it a boolean true, and then your loop will be an infinite loop. So this is the code we have for our loop, for our for loop. This is an example code. First we define a limit for our loop, which is 10, and then we create a loop with by initializing our iteration tracker, and then this our condition, and then this increment statement. So every time this loop is run, the first time this loop is run, I is 0, and then it checks if I is less than the limit over here. I is less than 10, which is I is less than limit, which is 10. Then that's true. 0 is less than 10, so it runs whatever block of code is in here, which for this instance is just print I. So for the first time, it's going to print 0, and then it gets to the end of the loop and then it moves back to the top. Increases I over here by 1, and then it checks again. Is I still less than 10? Yes, that's true, and then it runs so we just print 1 up to 0. Sorry, since it's starting from 0, print 0 up to 9, then the loop will end, because 10 won't be less than 10, it will be equal to 10. Yes, so let me run that for etc right now. So I have two examples over here. The first one is the one we just saw in the code I just explained, and then the second is another one that just prints if the current I is an odd number or an even number. So as you can see here, this for loop starts from 0 and and then checks if I is less than limit, which is 10, which is defined up here, and then increments I. And then over here the logic states if I modulo 2 is equal to 0, which is a way of checking if a number is an even or an odd number, or else it just prints as an odd number. If it's true, it prints the number is an even number, whatever number it is an even number. So if I run this right now, and then that's okay. So let me scroll up for you to see. So this is for the first loop over here. This is the output for the first loop. It starts from 0 and then it prints to 9. So 1 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 9. So because 10 is not up to 10 is not less than 10, so it just prints to 9, and then when it gets back to the top after I has been increased to 10, it checks, and then this is false, and then it breaks out to the loop. And then right after that, since there's something comes next, it just starts executing that loop. So that one also starts from here. 0 is an even number, and then it goes to odd, and then that and it ends with 9, which is an odd number. Yes, so that's 4 loops. There will be more 4 loops later, I think. Yeah. So let's talk about the while and the do while loop. I like the for loop. The while loop has just one expression in its brackets. So it's defined like this over here. So while then your condition comes in your brackets, and then your code. So over here, since you don't define you can choose how to define any condition and then put just true over there, and then you can break out of a loop with the break statement, or you can skip an iteration with the continue. As I think we talked about that on Tuesday or Monday, the last time we met. Yes. So the difference between the while and the do while loop is the do while loop executes at least once every time, because it runs your block of code first before it first checks the condition. So every time it just runs once at least. Every time you make a do while loop, it runs at least once. Yes. So think there's a syntax for do while loop. You start with the do first, and then so you do, and then you start with the do, and then you do something in there. You can just print something out to the terminal before it checks the condition for the first time. That's even for the first time of the iteration. It runs your block of code first before it checks the condition. If it's true, then it keeps running. But then if it's false, then at least it's run once, and then it skips the rest of the loop, and then it just goes to the next statement. Yes. So these are some code examples. This is a do while loop over here. So 11 is equal to 10. Moves to it goes to a do while loop. It prints out this first before it's, and then does the decrement, and then before it checks the condition if it's true. Yes. So that's that, and then this are while loop. The same block of code, but then it checks our condition first before it runs. So let's go to the terminal and then run a couple of loops, while loops, and then see. So let's start our do while. So this is our do while loop. I made 2 of them. So the first one just prints limit has been increased by 1, and then the current limit. But then the second one prints only even numbers. So let's run it and see. So this is the output of our do while loop over here. So it starts from this loop, the first loop, which just loops from just moves from 10 to 1 and then it ends based on the logic we set over here, while limit is still greater than 0. So if every time this is true, the loop keeps running, then it does that. And then the next one just checks for, just prints out only even numbers, so prints 8 to 0. But then as you can see, it prints 0 to over here, because it executes the code before it checks the condition. But then this over here has a different. Okay, so over here I used the break and then the continue. So let me increase this and then we can see this clearly. So I just started my do, and then inside my while I just make it true. So the loop is going to keep running until something else distracts the execution of the loop. So over here, what's going to end our loop is our break statement over here, and then the condition for our break statement to run over here is if limit is less than 0. So this example is to show how the break and then the continue statements are used. And then so we have our if here, which checks if it's 0 first. If it's not 0, then it checks if it's an even number with the same logic using modulo 2, and then it prints it out to the terminal. If it's not an even number 2 and then it's an odd number, you should do something. What should you do? You should just keep the whole iteration, because you're not going to, you just want to print the even numbers out. So the continue to skip just skips the iteration. So let's say for the first time this is run, our limit is decreased by 1 first. So our limit is 1 initially, and then it checks if it's 0 is less than 0. 1 is not less than 0, so this is false, so this is skipped. Then it checks if this is if 9 is an even number, 9 is an even number too. Then it runs this statement over here, which is else if it checks if it's an even number. So if a number modulo 2 is equal to 1, then it's an even number. Then what does it do? It just continues the iteration. It goes back to the top and then starts again, skipping the old iteration, throwing away all the data from the old iteration and then moving on to the next iteration. So that's what the continue does. Just skips the whole iteration to the next. Then the break, so when it gets to 0, it checks if 0 is less than 0 is not less than 0. It just keeps executing, and then when it gets to negative 1, it just breaks because negative 1 is less than 0. Yes, so that's that for here. That's what the break does. That's why the code ended. Okay, so I can end that. So that's that for the dual loop, and then talking about the break and then the continue statements. So I think we'll move on now